Right. We're going to go through chapter 10. It's going to be I think, a fairly quick study tonight. Chapter 10 here sets us up for the last three chapters of the book of Daniel. So we're going to have 10, 11, and 12 are all part of this same vision and prophecy. So getting into that tonight, we're going to get into Daniel 10's kind of an introduction to the next two chapters. And so here in chapter 10, we start this introduction to Daniel's final. It's going to be this final recorded vision. And this vision is going to take up, like I said, the last three chapters, concluding with chapter 12. And so this will probably take us, let me think here. If we get through next week, we'll probably have just tonight and 2 more weeks before we take a break until early next year. So this may be it, folks. So Daniel chapter 10, verse 1, if you want to follow along. In the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a message was revealed to Daniel, whose name was also called Belshazzar. So we remember that from earlier on. He was named Belshazzar by Nebuchadnezzar. And so Daniel is his Hebrew name. So this message was true, but the appointed time was long, and he understood the message. So Daniel has understanding and had understanding of the vision. So King Cyrus, remember, Cyrus conquered Babylon, and he appointed Darius as the king or the ruler over Babylon. So the 3rd year of Cyrus would be about 536 BC, and this is about 72 years after Daniel had been carried away as a youth to Babylon. And so Daniel now is an old man. He's in his mid-80s, but he's still working in the government. Daniel's lived out the entire 70 years of Babylonian / Persian captivity. And we talked about that last week in chapter 9, that they would have 70 years. And so by this time, the first wave of exile, so the 70 years has passed for their captivity, and so they start sending the exiles back into Israel, or to Jerusalem, to rebuild the temple. So the first wave of exiles had returned to Jerusalem under the leadership of Zerubbabel. And more of that can be read in the book of Ezra, chapters 1 and 2. You want to write that down. Daniel's not among these pilgrims that returned to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. And so we have a message, or a vision is revealed to Daniel. And like I said, this is also his last vision, and this will take up the last 3 chapters that we have the next 3 weeks here. So Daniel 10, verse 2, sorry. In those days, Daniel, was mourning 3 full weeks. So these are weeks of days now, as opposed to weeks of years that we read about in the last chapter. So in 3 weeks is 21 days, Daniel is mourning. And so we're not told exactly why Daniel is mourning and fasting. But we have commentary that I use a lot is by John Walvoord on commentary on Daniel. And he notes in his commentary that the occasion for Daniel's fasting probably was his concern for the pilgrims who had returned to Jerusalem 2 years before, and anticipated in his prayer that we read in Daniel chapter 9. As the book of Ezra makes plain, the children of Israel had encountered great difficulty in getting settled in the land. And although the altar had been set up and the foundation of the temple laid, Ezra chapter 3. The work had been suspended because of opposition by the people in the land. And all of this was a great concern to Daniel, for his primary purpose in encouraging the expedition had been the restoration of the temple as well as the city of Jerusalem. So this gives us a better idea why he could be in mourning. The pilgrims that had returned were facing a lot of opposition in rebuilding the temple and the walls around Jerusalem. There was sabotage, and then they had to work, side by side. One would be carrying a sword while the other would be working, and then he would take rest in the other. So they had to keep watch because of attack and whatnot. So another thought that he could be in mourning was or fasting and mourning would be in observance of the Passover. As we can read further on below, this may be another reason. Verse 3, it says, I ate no pleasant food, no meat or wine came into my mouth, and nor did I anoint myself at all till 3 whole weeks were fulfilled. So 3 full weeks could refer to Daniel's observance of the Passover, as well as the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which took place during the first month of the year. Passover was kept on the 14th of the month, and the Feast of Unleavened Bread for the next 8 days, with the whole festival ending on the 21st day of the month. So either way, Daniel fasted, or rather he abstained from the pleasant food for 3 weeks, which could mean that he ate or drank what was necessary only for survival, rather than to not eat or drink at all. So moving on to verse 4. Now on the 24th day of the first month, as I was by the side of the great river, that is the Tigris. We'll pause here really quick. The 24th day of the first month is on the Jewish calendar, is the month of Nisan, not the car company, but the month, which would equate to, in our calendar, as falls into the month of April, give or take several weeks. So our April would be their month of Nisan, which is the first month on the Jewish calendar. And so also the great river here is the river Tigris rather than the Euphrates, which had been spoken of previously. So there's about, in Babylon, where Daniel would be headquartered in Babylon, there's about a 35-mile distance between the Euphrates and the Tigris River. So in his duties, he's probably traveling around the country, even in his old age. So this also tells us that Daniel was not part of the pilgrimage to Jerusalem. Verse 5, he says, I lifted my eyes and looked, and behold, a certain man clothed in linen, whose waist was girded with gold of Uphaz. His body was like beryl, his face like the appearance of lightning, his eyes like torches of fire, his arms and feet like burnished bronze in color, and the sound of his words like the voice of a multitude. So this is interesting. So here we have a vision, or he has a vision of a certain man, and the identity of this person or this man is not given to us, but by his description, we have some biblical commentators, they speculate on who or what he could be, or this person may be. And so the certain man is either going to be an angel or an appearance of the pre-incarnate Christ. So Jesus before he became flesh appearing. Tim LaHaye in his what is this called? The Prophecy Study Bible, which is kind of a interesting Bible that I picked up recently. He notes that this may have been a glimpse of Christ himself, since it parallels the description of Jesus in Revelation. in Revelation 1:13 through 16. So Revelation 1:13 through 16 says, "And in the midst of the seven lampstands, one like the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to his feet, or down to the feet, and girded about the chest with a golden band. His head and hair were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were like a flame of fire. His feet were like fine brass, as if refined in a furnace, and his voice as the sound of many waters. And he had in his right hand 7 stars, and out of his mouth went a sharp 2-edged sword, and his countenance was like the sun shining in its strength." So very similar in the descriptions. If this is indeed Christ or Jesus, then the glimpse of the Son of God is befitting for this last vision given to Daniel, for it's a most significant prophecy of the end times. If this is not Christ, then of course it is an angel of the Lord. And though not mentioned by name, some others also speculate that this could be another appearance of Gabriel. My thought personally is that this is an angel and not the Lord, Christ, or it's either an angel, or it could be 2 separate beings, as we will read on later, because there's more description of another angel, or maybe not another angel, but another man who could be a different person. So my thought, like I said, is that this is an angel of the Lord and not Christ incarnate. And because we'll read this in a minute, that this person needed the help of Michael the archangel, so he was in battle for 3 weeks trying to get a message to Daniel. So if it's Christ, he really wouldn't need to have the help of Michael the archangel against an evil force, because he's deity, he's God. Verse 7, "And I, Daniel, alone saw the vision, for the men who were with me did not see the vision, but a great terror fell upon them, so that they fled to hide themselves. Therefore I was left alone when I saw this great vision, and no strength remained in me, for my vigor was turned to frailty in me, and I retained no strength." So he says a great terror fell upon the people, his companions, whoever he was with, and they fled to hide. And so sinful man, we can't be in the presence of God or of his holiness. In Revelation, it speaks of men hiding in caves and in rocks from Christ or from God, and Christ the Lamb, the wrath of the Lamb. In Revelation 6:15 says, "And the kings of the earth and great men, the rich men, the commanders, the mighty men, every slave and every free man hid themselves in the caves and in the rocks of the mountains, and said to the mountains and the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne, which is God, and the wrath of the Lamb, which is Christ." So same kind of idea. Verse 9, moving on. "Yet I heard the sounds of his words, and while I heard the sound of his words, I was in a deep sleep on my face, with my face to the ground." So here he's in this presence of this certain man, and he's hearing his words. It's drained Daniel's energy, and it puts him in a deep sleep. And we saw that, I think, in some of the previous chapters too. Moving on, in verse 10, he says, "Suddenly a hand touched me, which made me tremble on my knees and on the palms of my hands. And he said to me, O Daniel, man greatly beloved, understand the words that I speak to you, and stand upright, for I have now been sent to you." While he was speaking this word to me, I stood trembling. So again, if this is an appearance of Christ, here we have it's another type of individual, an angel who gives him strength. And like In another earlier vision, remember that Daniel is made to stand upright also. A man greatly beloved. So although Daniel is a fallen sinner like all men, he, like David, King David, is a man after God's own heart, and he is greatly beloved of God. So we remember also in chapter 9, in verse 23, that Daniel was told that he was greatly beloved. So same thing here. Verse 12. And then he said to me, do not fear, Daniel, for the last day that let's see, say that again. Do not fear, Daniel, for from the last, boy, I don't see last, there's a first there. Let me say it again. Then he said to me, do not fear, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart to understand and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I have come because of your words. So he's humbling himself. Remember that he also humbled himself in the beginning of chapter 9, where he fasted, he wore sackcloth and ashes, and as a form of being humble before the Lord. It says, do not fear. So the Bible, and this is really cool because the Bible says, do not fear 365 times. Fear not, or do not fear, is a reassurance that God is always in control. We don't have to fear. It said 3 weeks before when I began to pray, or when Daniel began to pray, God sent an answer. So, God, I think I touched on this last week, God always answers prayer, and sometimes the answer is yes, sometimes the answer is no. Other times the answer is wait on the Lord. But we know from James James 5:16 that the effective, fervent prayers of a righteous man avails much. But on the other hand, sin can hinder our prayers. So we always want to confess our sin before the Lord and repent or turn from sin and live in righteousness, so that our prayers and petitions before God are answered. Excuse me. Moving on to verse 13. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days, and behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I had been left alone there with the kings of Persia. So, like I said before, if this is Christ, why would he need help? He's God. The prince of Persia is a satanic angelic leader who is over the area of Persia, which is modern day Iraq, Iran. And in contrast, Michael, the archangel, is the protector over Israel, or God's people. And so we know that there's also different ranks of angels, similar to the military. And I believe these beings are in the same positions today. I believe Michael watches over Israel and the people of Israel, the Jewish people. I still believe there's a prince of Persia, and there are others. There are angelic hosts that are positioned all over the world. They're positioned over continents and regions and nations and cities. They're positioned over people groups. They're positioned over neighborhoods and individuals. Have you ever gone into a part of town that isn't, it's just feels dark and maybe oppressive, or going to a certain area? I can travel, 10 miles west, and, it's like complete different feeling than like the area that I live in. So, you can feel like a dark, oppressive presence in certain parts of town. And it's that way with nations and cities and continents and so on and so forth, countries. And so we know prayer can change all that. So for instance, also Ephesians 6:12, For we do not, Paul says, we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. And so there is this struggle between the holy and the fallen angels that influence the political and the social conditions of the world. And like I said, I think prayer can also play a big part in changing that. You know, First Thessalonians 5:17 says, "Pray without ceasing." Ephesians 6:18, praying always with all prayer and supplications in the Spirit. You know, continue earnestly in prayer, being vigilant in it, and with thanksgiving. Colossians 4:2. You know, we're told all throughout Scripture, you know, we to pray, to continue praying. How many of you have read, you know, the old book by C.S. Lewis, The Screwtape Letters? Anyone? Mike and Lynn? Nobody else. I recommend you guys reading it because it gives you a glimpse into the schemes of the underworld, as to how the fallen angels, angelic beings, they scheme against mankind, and they try to bring us to a fall. If you've never read it, I recommend it. It's an older book. I think it was written. He wrote it in the 40s, if I remember right, around the time of World War II. Also, anybody seen the movie Nefarious, which came out earlier this year? That's another movie that kind of gives a glimpse into the underworld.
Hey, Timothy.
Yes, sir.
There's also a book called This Present Darkness.
Yes,
that's by Frank Peretti. That's a really good one too.
That's another one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Man. So with that being, you know, those are things you can get an idea, books and a movie there to get an idea of how the underworld works against, to hinder the work of Christ in our lives and to get a stronghold in our lives. But our prayers can help in the spiritual realm, and we need to pray for our leaders, to pray for our country. We need to pray for the peace of Jerusalem and Israel. We're told in the Bible to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. We pray for people that would come to the saving knowledge of Christ. Pray the Lord's Prayer, you know, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. It's Matthew chapter 6, verse 9 through 13. So anyways, prayer is a big deal. Moving on, in verse 14. He says, now I have come to make you understand what will happen to your people in the latter days, for the vision refers to many days yet to come. And when he had spoken such words to me, I turned my face toward the ground and became speechless. So this angel now explains that his purpose in coming is to make Daniel understand what would happen to his people, which is Israel, in the last days. And many days, it says many days yet to come. So meaning much time will be involved in this vision, as in many years. The vision being continued, or we will continue with this vision in the next two chapters. They give more, they give the details to the vision. So the particulars of the vision include experiences with, which we already talked about earlier, was Antiochus Epiphanes. And then they also culminate the Great Tribulation before the second coming of Christ. So in the near future, as far as Daniel's concerned, this future goes about 375 years into the future, as far as Antiochus Epiphanes and how he desecrated the temple and so on, persecuted the Jews. We read about that, I think, a couple of weeks ago. And then it also goes, you know, we're 2,500 years past when this prophecy was given now. So we're you know, in the future time, we see, now we see that we're seeing the signs of converging all at once of the things spoken of towards what would happen in the end. So Daniel probably didn't understand the details, and he he could be reassured that God has a plan or had a plan which ended in the ultimate victory of divine power. Although the prophecies made clear that there were powerful forces at work against Israel, which would inflict on them much suffering and loss, as we continue to see today, in the end, the power of God will triumph, and Israel would and will be exalted as a nation. So next, in this next section, we see Daniel, how Daniel is strengthened in his weakness. So moving on to verse 16. And suddenly one having the likeness of the sons of men touched my lips. And then I opened my mouth and spoke, saying to him who stood before me, my Lord, lowercase l, because of the vision, my sorrows have overwhelmed me, and I have retained no strength. For how can this servant of my Lord talk with you, my Lord? Question mark, and that's lowercase l for Lord, not capital. As for me, no strength remains in me now, nor is any breath left in me. So we had this angelic being having the likeness of a man. And as I've said in the past, we've possibly entertained angels when helping strangers. Hebrews 13:2 says, do not forget to entertain strangers, for by doing so, some have unwittingly entertained angels. So he touched his lips so he could speak. And Daniel is in such shock that he's speechless. He says, my sorrows have overwhelmed me. So the ancient Hebrew word translated sorrows has the thought of a twisting or a writhing in pain. And it's used in several places in the Old Testament for labor pains and childbirth. So Daniel here was so severely affected by the vision that he could barely breathe, much less could he deal with the prophetic complexities. So then moving on, verse 18, then again, the one having the likeness of a man touched me and strengthened me. And he said, O man greatly beloved, fear not. We have another, do not fear. Peace be to you, be strong. Yes, be strong. So when he spoke to me, I was strengthened and said, let my Lord speak, for you have strengthened me. So the likeness of a man, again, is this angelic being. He's not God. And God touches Daniel through an intermediary, an angel. Daniel's strength is renewed. He says it twice. He says, be strong, be strong. Again, he says, fear not, peace be with you. And with his strength restored, Daniel is now ready to hear the prophetic answer to his prayer. Verse 20. Then he said, say that again. Then he said, do you know why I have come to you? And now I must return to fight with the prince of Persia. And when I have gone forth, indeed the prince of Greece will come. So he goes on, he says, I must return to fight with this prince of Persia. So Daniel is about to receive an answer to his prayer, but the battle's not yet over for this heavenly messenger, this angel. And he must battle the prince of Persia, and then he goes on to battle the prince of Greece. So we know that just from the prophecy, from what we've seen so far with history, the first is Persia, Babylon, and then he's in Persia now, so he's fighting the prince of Persia, and then Greece would be the next empire to take over, followed by Rome. But each will have a power over God's people is basically what the meaning is. Persia and then Greece. The last verse in this chapter, he says, but I will tell you what is noted in the scripture of truth. No one upholds me against these except Michael, your prince. So then we have another reference to Michael the archangel, who is the prince over the Jewish people, over Israel. And so Michael seemed to be an angelic guardian of Israel. He's battling against the demonic representative of Persia or any other who oppose God's people. So on earth, Israel seemed lowly and weak, but in the heavens, Israel had the mightiest representative of all, which is Michael the Archangel. So next week, we'll get into the prophecy. We're about 7:45, so we're about 15 minutes short, but we can all take a break early tonight. We'll get into the prophecy.